Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Friday, December 5th. Derek Van Riper, Sarah's Jed Lowry here with you on this episode. The hot stove continues to cook. We got more players on the move. New homes for Devin Williams and Cody Ponce. A familiar place for Emilio Pagán. Cedric Mullins has a new team. We got a trade between the Red Sox and Pirates we're going to get to. Got a great mailbag question about the long-term potential of Jack Caglianone and Luke Keaschall. We'll dig into that. Plus, we got the Hall of Fame ballot. The Contemporary Era Committee meets on Sunday. There's going to be some players probably getting in from that vote as well. And a piece that Jason Stark wrote about doubles and triples disappearing and what baseball might need to do about that. First and foremost, Jed, welcome back from the Thanksgiving break. How was your Thanksgiving?
Yeah. We had a great Thanksgiving. Good to be back. We spent it over in Central Oregon, and like I said, quiet Thanksgiving, which is always nice. Drama free.
What are you getting weather-wise in Central Oregon on Thanksgiving? Is it kind of like 50s and gray, or is it actually all right?
No, we're in high desert over there, so I actually played golf. I played golf. It wasn't warm, but it was a beautiful day. And when you get the sun out in Central Oregon, it just at that high desert elevation, it feels warmer than the thermostat will show you.
And the ball flies, I guess, huh?
Despite the cold weather, the ball still goes a lot further.
Yeah.
That's a hack. I got to get out there sometime. Got to get out there.
I saw someone say you should never play golf under 60 degrees. And I was like, ooh,
I've actually found that cold weather golf makes my game better because you try less, right? It's like all I'm trying to do here is make solid contact. And because if you don't, you're either getting face full of mud or your hands are ringing for the next 15 minutes. Right. So it simplifies the game.
Well, hey, you both have an open invitation to come to Madison anytime you want. We have lots of snow on the ground. We can snow golf. You're going to want a different set of clubs for that. Whole new set of gear. I've never done it myself.
Is that a thing?
It'll be a first for me. We'll just go.
Is it like a black ball too?
No.
You do it with the white ball?
Neon. Well, white,
yellow, orange.
Yeah, get the yellow ball. Or I'm sure it's not novel, but it's probably not something that a lot of people partake in.
No, but we find ways when we get a little melt in January, people get out. People get on the course. It's 38 degrees. People are like, I'm tired of being inside. I'm getting out. I'm playing.
I mean, that's like Bandon Dunes. You're going out there regardless. That's kind of the experience.
Absolutely.
Anyway, I digress.
I mean, it was born in Scotland. It's not like Scotland's like, oh yes, it's always 60 and sunny.
Exactly right. It's part of the game.
Yeah, you got to enjoy the elements a little bit if you're going to be a real golfer. Let's get on to some baseball news. Devin Williams has a new home, stays in New York, but goes to the Mets. It's a 3-year, $51 million deal. I saw a note in Will Salmon's story that he had at least 5 other offers he was considering. So Devin Williams must really like New York. And, $51 million could help me make a lot of places home. I'd have no problem in New York on $51 million over 3 years. I could probably make that work. Interesting thing here, though, guys. This does not rule out the possibility of Edwin Diaz coming back. And Williams even said he's open to whichever role, setup or closer, the Mets need him in. Again, $51 million over 3 years. That'll make you pretty flexible to the role that you work in. Yeah, sure. I'll pitch the 7th. I'll pitch the 8th. I'll pitch the 9th, whatever you need. I'm making $51 million over the next 3 years. So what do you think happens here, Eno? Do you think Edwin Diaz actually returns to make Devin Williams a setup man? Because this is exactly a scenario we were talking about on our last episode. If you're doing early drafts, you don't know where players are going. Williams is in that bucket of good enough, even as a setup guy, to be great from a fantasy perspective. Do you think the Mets load up the bullpen by reuniting with Diaz even after getting Devin Williams?
I mean, this certainly gives them some leverage in conversations with Edwin Diaz. I think some of the rumors are that Edwin Diaz wants 5 years. It's a lot to give to a 31-year-old reliever. And he was kind of the guy who broke the record for reliever deals in the first place. So, reading the tea leaves for like a David Stearns type situation, it's kind of hard to know what Stearns in New York is yet. But I do think that the Brandon Nimmo trade had something to do with the last few years on that contract, the 5-year commitment to Brandon Nimmo versus the 3-year commitment to Marcus Semien. So I feel like if I'm going to guess anything, I'm going to guess that Stearns doesn't want to give Edwin Diaz 5 years. And if Edwin Diaz takes 3 years and comes back, then that's fine. But I could see somebody else giving Edwin Diaz 5 years. I don't know who though. Dodgers?
Yeah, it's only money
after the bullpen.
It'll be interesting to see how. I don't know if you guys saw the headline. Cohen got his casino and development approved. It'll be interesting to see how that affects the spending there, which is already high.
Right? Does he need to lose less money on the Mets, payroll because he needs to invest that money in the casino? Because the casino will be a lot of upfront money.
Mm-hmm. But then at the same time,
these things get financed usually, right?
Well, I think
be a ton of his money.
I have to assume that they're showing a lot of revenue from that, moving forward. And so, does he want to try to build that brand, continue to build the brand,
right?
When that thing is
money he's going to earn later.
Exactly. Yeah. It's an interesting conversation at the very least.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think about the teams that have the deepest pockets having multiple relievers north of 15 million per year. Because even if Edwin Diaz is willing to take a shorter deal, I would imagine it's going to be 25 million per year for Edwin Diaz. I mean, that's not out of the question given the track record and despite the age. I mean, I don't think the stuff has tailed off all that much.
But think on the best bullpens you've ever seen or the best bullpens of recent time. I don't think they're usually built in free agency. I think they're usually built from player development, from switching a starter to a reliever, from just having good, internal processes, having young guys. Mm-hmm. Like think of the Mariners bullpens; those are trades. Those are pickups. There's there isn't a free agent in that Mariner bullpen. You think of the old Yankees bullpens? Were those free agent bullpens? I mean, there's Mariano, but even after that, it's Weaver, it's trading for Williams. It's not necessarily buying the best guy on the market. And then you think of what are the big bullpens that were built in free agency? They didn't work out. The Dodgers bullpen is the free agent bullpen. And that didn't work out. So
yeah, it has all historically been a gamble, right? Because it's hard to predict year over year what these guys are going to do. But I do think the trend in player development, though, is you mentioned this earlier. It's turning former starters into relievers. Now there's a lot of guys that are going through the system as relievers, and so their whole career they've been developed as relievers.
That's true.
So yeah, so how is the free agent reliever now? More prepared to stay in that role because that's how they were developed.
Oh, that's interesting. They've just been a reliever forever. There used to be this idea there's not even such a thing as a relief prospect. And
exactly.
I think that's out of the window because especially if you're doing a rental trade, like a rental August 1st trade, a relief prospect is actually something that you might want back. Something that could be in your bullpen next year.
Yeah, and you could make the argument there's almost a trend going from bullpen arms to starters now, right? Between Hicks, Holmes, because
the rumors on Helsley.
Yeah, the rumors on Helsley. And especially with the expectation of the starter, I mean, if you get 5 innings out of a guy, that's a good start now. So if you take a high leverage guy who has great stuff, but maybe can't. Or hasn't performed in those moments, and you get 4 innings out of him at the start of the game with the elite stuff, that seems like a pretty good value proposition.
Yeah, I wonder what Luke Weaver's next role is going to be.
Yeah, he could end up back in a rotation. That would not be that surprising if some team tried that. But to your point, Devin Williams, as a pitching prospect in the Brewers organization, was a starter up until 2018. In 2019, he became at Double-A a reliever full time, and that's when everything really clicked into place for him. So I think most people are looking at what he did last year now and saying, okay, a 4.79 ERA, that doesn't go with a 1.13 whip, kind of settled down after a bit of a bumpy start with the Yankees. More likely than not, we're looking at the guy that's getting those sub-2 ERAs and near 1 whips. Like, that's probably what you're getting this year. I know the projections are calling for a 3.14 ERA, especially
That's
getting half of those outings. Yeah, that's steamer. Like, even getting half of those outings, like in Citi Field, 286. Yeah, like that seems very fair, and I could see him beating that again.
The key number here that I just think it's interesting because it's kind of an old school number that we don't talk about as much on the show anymore. But for his career, Devin Williams has a 75.8% left on base rate. So 76. League average is around 71. But the more people you strike out, the more you leave people on base. So you can run a 76 if you're a high strikeout guy like he is. Last year, and the 3 years leading up, he had 77, 85, 93 with Milwaukee. And then last year, 55, by far the worst year of his career. It's the real outlier. And if you just take that and you take his regular 76% rate and put it on what he did last year, you would take 10 earned runs off of the picture, and he would have had an ERA in the low 3s. So.
Well, I think
that's when we talk about like relievers year to year. That's, this one little thing went wrong, and it was 10 earned runs, and that's it. It was 10 earned runs that changed him from having a crappy year to having a normal year.
Well, and I, you consider that he now has a year of playing in New York under his belt. And so, he's going to be a little desensitized to the media environment in New York. I mean, I'm DVR, no offense, but I'm assuming the media, coverage in Milwaukee is not the same
as it is in those clubhouses. More
a smaller
media.
Group. Yeah, I think it's a little friendlier by comparison. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, the Mets stand to, benefit greatly from this deal. I mean, like I said, the guy's has a year of experience playing in the market now and is, poised by all accounts for a bounce back year.
Yeah, it gets the easier of the two parks to pitch in of the two New York parks as well. Cody Ponce heads to Toronto, 3 years, $30 million. That is a new record for a former big leaguer that went to the KBO and came back. I think Eric Fetty previously held the record. That was like 2-14, 2-15 a couple seasons ago. Cody Ponce turned into a different pitcher. We talked about that earlier in the winter. Velocity went up in Korea. He was sitting 95, touching 98. I saw in Mitch Bannon's write-up. He had a splitterish kick change that he was starting to throw. And he had the cutter and curveball that he had prior to leaving. So this looks like a improved starter's arsenal. And there's a very good chance that Ponce is going to come in and have a lot more success in the big leagues this time around with the Jays.
Yeah, my source in the KBO said that it's a 600 RPM kick change. And
600 RPM? What?
Yes, high 80s. So it's an 88 mile an hour, 600 RPM, kick change that functions a little bit like a splitter. Another a guy that has that low of a spin on their splitter is Cade Smith, Hurston Waldrop, Seranthony Dominguez. I mean, these are some of the best splitters in the game. So it's going to have a ton of movement. He thinks it'll work against righties and lefties. Yeah, and he went up from 93 with Pittsburgh a couple years ago to now he's sitting 95. So I think that's a significant difference where, some of these other guys, when they go and they come back, they don't change as much. But, Fetty was decent when he came back too. So he came back with a new sweeper. And that was the big deal. But Fetty did not change any fastballs, did not add any velo, whereas Ponce has added velo. So I think that he deserves the bigger deal than Fetty. And I think he'll unseat Barrios for the fifth spot in that rotation or make him go to a 6. But they've also had some success with moving guys around. There was some stuff in Hoffman's deal that suggested they were actually thinking about maybe making Hoffman more of a starter. And then the Cuban guy,
Yario Rodriguez.
Yeah, they've moved him around where he's taken starts and he's been in the bullpen. So I think worst case scenario, he's a better Yariel Rodriguez, where he's in the bullpen, he's a spot starter. He gets to 1 win above replacement. In each of the next 3 years, and that's what you paid for. And so you pat yourself on the back, you get what you paid for. But the upside is he becomes a league average starter. He's a 2-win guy, and at 95, like maybe he's even a guy who starts a postseason game for you.
Yeah, I mean, and what seems to be a trend is Ross Atkins likes guys with splitters, right?
Yeah,
Gossman, Savage, yeah.
This is a kick. It's a kick change, but it's very splitter like. And I think
that is, yeah. I mean, listen, we can start calling it the Terminator and the Dominator. Like we can go full major league.
Well, watch this release again. He's got the release in slow motion at the end.
Yeah, no, I mean that's a splitter. That's a splitter that between the ring finger and the and the pointer finger, right? So yeah. I mean, like I said, we can. I mean,
he has the ring finger up off the ball, but like, yeah.
I mean, like I said, we can come up with all the names that we want, but that's an all intents and purposes a splitter.
Yeah,
is it good? Looks like it's pretty good.
I think so.
I mean, there's a lot of depth there. That's for sure. And if he's
strikeout record in KBO.
I mean, goodness, you look at the numbers, 252 strikeouts in 180 innings and only giving up 128 hits. Yeah. I mean, so he figured out something. I mean, how those numbers translate to, Major League Baseball is we will see, but with a higher velocity, I mean, hard to tell exactly, but that looked like a higher release point, kind of like a Savage. So, I think that, like I said, yet to be seen how he actually executes when he's back on a big league mound. But the stuff looks like it's taken a step forward.
Yeah, certainly has. I mentioned up top, Emilio Pagán, going back to a familiar place. He's staying with the Reds 2 years, $20 million. He can opt out after the first year if he so chooses. Coming off really a career year and one in which he handled the closer role really well. Emilio Pagán's put together just a nice career as a reliever. 32 saves, easily a career high. Previous high water mark was 20 all the way back in 2019 with the Rays. Shocker. He's going to be 35 in the spring, so there's a little bit of the risk of fall off just in terms of stuff. But overall, he's held up really well over the course of his career, despite having a pretty consistent problem with the long ball. So I guess the main question here is, do we think Pagán could actually save 30 games in consecutive seasons? Because I was surprised he did it the first time, even as someone that could appreciate the quality reliever that he is. I don't think of him as that late inning, completely dominant sort of guy that goes out there and just shuts you down in the 9th inning, but he handled it well.
I'm so happy. I mean, I played with Emilio in 2018. Just a great teammate, great dude. Always had that really like high ride, like low release point, high ride fastball. So I'm really happy for him. He's just performed really well, and I think is well deserving of this.
Some of the best velocity of his career. I mean, it is fair to wonder like how much of some of his other years that weren't as great with more homers were lower velo. But one thing that he represents that's kind of interesting is that the adding extra pitches trend has gone to relievers as much as it has to starters. So relievers haven't quite added an entire pitch type in the last 3 years like starters have, but they are now up to around 2.6 pitches on average per reliever. And he's a 3-pitch reliever. He's got the cutter, the splitter, and the fastball. And I could see that softening the blow a little bit when it comes to, maybe he loses a half tick or whatever. But that's also why he's not getting a long-term deal, because that's not plus velo for a reliever anymore. 95.7 last year and 94.8 the year before. So there's some risk that he drops down below 95 and gives up more homers. But for a market, Cincinnati, like the way they are, they're not going to get Edwin Diaz, most likely. And I don't think the bullpen was good enough that they could just let Pagán go.
Right. I don't see a lot of internal candidates that are ready to take over that role immediately to begin the season anyway. So I think at least for the start of the season, the first half, Pagán's most likely the capital C closer again for the Reds for good reason. Now they're paying him, and he pitched very well in that role a year ago. Might be a little underrated in fantasy because people are going to look at the longer term track record and be more skeptical than they should be. But the situation looks like a good one for him. Cedric Mullins goes to the Rays, 1 year, $7 million here. And I feel like Cedric Mullins' name comes up a disproportionate amount on our show when we're trying to fill outfield spots for a reasonable.
He should have been a giant.
He should have been a giant. He should have been an Astro. We tried trading him a bunch of places at the deadline last year. I don't think we landed on the Mets. That's where he was. He's a career 254, 324, 444 hitter against righties. It's a 113 WRC plus. It's a 230, 298, 359 line against lefties. The Rays platoon and platoon and platoon some more. They'll always max that out. My assumption is he's not going to see many lefties. That's fine. He's going to be in a corner. That's fine. The weird thing I noticed, as someone who's been in the AL East for the bulk of his time in the big leagues, Mullins is a 189, 233, 287 hitter at the Trop. That's a relatively small sample size. I think it's something like 30 games, but we've heard things about the Trop being a difficult place to hit, Jed. So first off, your experience hitting there, did you have any trouble visually in there? I think it's the batter's eye and how the lights work that causes problems for some guys. And would you even think twice about a player visiting there and not having a lot of success in the park from a park factors perspective?
Yeah. So anecdotally, I didn't really like hitting in the Trop, whatever it was visually. I felt like I was in a casino, where like there was like this like weird lighting and like
LED.
It just, it just wasn't my, my favorite place to hit. That being said, it's a little hard to say definitively based on a visiting player, but I think it gives you a glimpse into it. I think he's going to outperform 189, 233, 287 slash line. And it's low risk for the Rays in a 1 year 7, although, they're not going out and spending a ton, but I think that that there's good value in that deal for the Rays if he's continues to be a strong, hitter against right-handed pitching.
And I disagree a little bit. I think he'll be in center because Chandler Simpson hasn't proven that he's a center fielder. Jake Fraley is all right, but I think I take Mullins. I know that Mullins' numbers and defensively have fallen a little bit. But for 1 year, I think I still take him over Fraley. And then DeLuca is a right-hander. So I think that could just be the playing time share is Mullins and DeLuca in center.
Well, and that might be that might have been part of his decision-making process is, hey, I got the opportunity to play center field again. And maybe he and his agent thought that was the best way to create value in the following year is if he goes out there and shows he can, if he has a good offensive year again, that's another way for him to get, another one or maybe 2 year deal.
Yeah, if he can reverse the trend a little bit in the outs above average, train his body, like train up for speed and try to have like a 1 or 2 OAA type season where he can be like, I'm a good center fielder. Then I think he could follow the Bader trail more as a lefty where he's like keeps getting 1 and 10 or 1 and 8 and extends his career as long as people think that he can play center because it's really hard to get a center fielder in free agency. So that's why I like this deal because the Rays paid $7 million for a guy who might give them a win and a half. It's like it's the cheapest, stupidest, littlest thing, but it is really hard to get a center fielder in free agency. And if the other choice was to play DeLuca full time or Jake Magnum and Chandler Simpson in center, which I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that Simpson's going to be a center fielder despite all his prodigious tools. So good little deal, as they say, as damning with faint praise as that is.
It's where the Rays live, though, more often than not. I'm glad you're more optimistic about center field for him because that platoon with DeLuca does make a lot of sense if they want to go that route. But then with the Rays, you're like, what trades are still coming, right? Who else is actually going to be there between
Brandon
now
Lau.
and opening day? Yeah, well, we've been trying to find a Brandon Lau fit for about 4 years now.
To the Giants.
Probably more than Cedric Mullins.
Yeah.
Yeah, but one thing that's weird though, if they do trade Brandon Lau, it's not actually obvious who would play second base. It's like this. They don't have like we'll just trade Brandon Lau because we have X. I mean, if you're playing Taylor Walls and Carson Williams up the middle, you are ceding a lot of offense.
Well, you are with Walls for sure. You might also be with Williams. That's more of a question for me. I think we know what Walls is likely to do as a hitter. Williams is a high risk, high reward with the bat sort of player that will play a great shortstop too.
If you're looking around the division too, if you're the Rays, are you confident you're competing for a playoff spot in that division? I mean, everybody picks the Orioles as the bounce back team. The Blue Jays just played in the World Series,
and the
Yankees are the Yankees.
Yeah, Red Sox seem to be ascendant.
Yeah. I mean,
maybe you just trade Lau because you're like he's got 1 year left on his deal and we can get something. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, I
think is your window now? Are you looking at your window as the Rays 2 to 3 years from now?
Right.
My belief, and this is kind of how the Brewers work, the Guardians, a lot of those.
They play a little bit for every year, right?
They play for every year. They play their version of let's try for this year. If it doesn't work out, we'll move some stuff at the deadline. Then we'll turn the page to next year. I don't think there's really it's going to get easier in 3 years sort of mentality, which is probably the right way to play it in the AL East, especially with the Jays being up in spending right now. The Red Sox having all that young talent that's hitting the big leagues right now. The Yankees still being the Yankees, right? Like nothing's going to change with that big three. So if it's not going to get that much easier, you have to just keep doing the thing that's made you successful.
But the thing that has made them successful, and the Brewers and everybody like in this spot is thinking beyond just this year. It's like I am caring about this year, but I also care about next year. Like the Rays are notorious for managing their 40-man. If somebody is about to come, like has to be on the 40-man, like they don't trade him the year before he has to be on the 40-man. They trade him 2 years before. They traded Xavier Edwards 2 years before he had to be on the 40-man because they didn't necessarily want to put him on the 40-man. They wanted to get something for him, you know? So that's the same thing that I think they'll do. I think they'll do it with Lau. I think they'll trade him and they'll come up with something. Maybe they'll even make a free agent signing or something. Something I'm not thinking of. Luis Arias, something strange, you know? Like if Arias's number drops enough, then they trade Lau, sign the Arias, and hope that they get basically the same production.
And the Arias word cloud grows. I love talking about Luis Arias on that show. We got one trade to get to. The password, Justinson Garcia, is on the move. He's going to Pittsburgh, where he's going to have a chance to play. He's not blocked anymore in Boston. He's close to Major League ready. From a tools perspective, the questions come with the hit tool. Is there going to be too much swing and miss from the tap into above average power? Got good speed. He's the kind of player that in Pittsburgh should get a very nice window of playing time once they deem him ready, whether that's opening day or sometime soon after. I think we're going to see a lot of Justinson Garcia in Pittsburgh this year. So he's the main piece going to Pittsburgh. Johan Oviedo goes back to Boston. Two other players going to Boston, one other player going to Pittsburgh there. But as far as Garcia and Oviedo go, what's your initial reaction to this deal?
They're both flawed players, so it's really interesting. Garcia has a 75-mile-an-hour bat speed, and so it's a power play that's probably going to have a bad batting average and a bad strikeout rate. I think that the where the worm turns is the OBP. Can he put up double-digit walk rates like he did sometimes in the minors at the major league level and be low batting average, high OBP, high slug? Then he'll be a regular. I think that in the short term, he might have the defense to play center field. He played 52 games last year in center field, so I don't think he's a long-term center fielder, but They could use some help there if they want to move O'Neal Cruz around. And Oviedo has a great fastball. All of a sudden, after Tommy John, he came back with 5 inches more of ride on the fastball, and it's really instructive to see. The average fastball in major leagues last year had 14 inches of ride and 7 inches of fade. His had 15 and 6. So it's pretty much dead zone if you just look at average numbers. But if you look at what's on the screen right now, you see his arm slot and you say, oh, wait, the average arm slot is 40 degrees and his is 26. So he's 15 degrees below the league average arm slot, but he's throwing up league average ride and movement. So it's a weird fastball. It's a good fastball. It has some, it looks a little bit like Peyton Toley's. It may be 95 instead of 87, but there's something similar in this is a surprising fastball shape. The hitter's going to see 26. They're going to think it's going to be a sinker, and he throws them a legit 4-seamer. So it's a good fastball. The only problem is he came back with 2 miles per hour less on his slider. He didn't have a secondary or another pitch that rated above average by Stuff Plus. James Paxton never got the velocity back on his slider after surgery. So there's a possibility he doesn't have a good secondary pitch, and he never had good command before TJ. So if you're saying, oh, another year out of TJ, he's going to have good command, you have to regress him to what he was. And he didn't have good command really ever in his career. So I think there's some reliever risk here, but the buzz is he's going to start, which means there's probably more movement to happen in Boston, because if he's starting, that gives them 6 with Patrick Sandoval and Cutter Crawford. They could go with 6. Cutter Crawford could go to the bullpen, or they could trade Bayo or Cutter, maybe in a Ketel Marte deal.
Another guy we've been trying to trade for all year.
That's right. Well, but there's some buzz around that one. I mean, people are talking about it. And the thing is, it is bad news for Peyton Toley and Connolly Early, who are they seem like they might be on the cusp of being in the rotation, but now there's 6 guys without options ahead of them. Mm-hmm. So they're gonna start in the minor leagues.
Yeah, at least as things appear in the first week of December, right? With most of that group healthy and, the other moves still unknown. You're right. It does hurt their short-term outlooks for sure. Maybe a little window in keeper and dynasty, though, to try to pick those guys up if you're interested in them long-term, because the opportunities will be there eventually for both Early and Toley, whether it's in Boston or somewhere else. Maybe those guys are trade pieces they use to make a deal like the one you're talking about for Ketel Marte. Let's get to a long-term potential question. We got a great mailbag question from Gilded Age, wanting us to look at the long-term potential of Jack Caglianone and Luke Keaschall. And I'm going to paraphrase the original question a ton. If you saw the original on Discord, you get full context. If you didn't, no worries. The question basically boils down to this. Jack Caglianone is a top-end bat speed guy, has a completely different type of swing than Luke Keaschall. And, what does that mean for their respective short-term production, but also their long-term potential? Does Jack have a higher ceiling because of the way he swings the bat? Does Keaschall have a lower ceiling and some limitations because of how he swings the bat? So we're going to dig into this a little bit. And Jed, I'm going to give it to you first. I mean, when you look at Jack Caglianone, what do you see in his swing right now? And does that help us understand some of the problems he had trying to break through as a rookie in 2025?
Certainly. I mean, you look at the elite bat speed, first of all, right? You're 77.3 mile an hour bat speed, big, strong kid. It's impossible not to get excited about somebody like this. I mean, you're 29-degree tilt. He's in his legs. It's a flatter than average swing, but not like a Junior Caminero flat swing. Then I look at some of these other things. And initially I was looking at the depth, right? And he's 21.9 inches depth in box, and that's center of mass. And so in my head, I was like, okay, this guy is really far up in the box. The league average is 27.9. Yeah. So his depth in box is 21.9. So his center of mass is 6 inches forward from the center of mass. And so I guess I just assumed when I read that he was actually really far up in the box, right? Like, because if your center of mass is 6 inches further up, I just assumed that his feet were further up as well. And my initial notes here were he's way up in the box. And I was like, let me just double check where the feet are. And this is pretty unbelievable when you start looking at this. Like his feet are actually almost identical. He's a little more spread out than Judge, but the back foot is kind of at the same spot. Yet his center of mass is almost 4.5 inches further up than Judge. And so I look at the weight distribution of his stance where, I would call Judge more of a 60-40 guy where he's kind of on that backside staying behind the ball. Clearly, Caglianone is a guy that's more that 50-50 stance. And I think that when you're in that 50-50 stance and your center of mass is kind of right down the middle, when you take that stride, there's just going to be a lot of head movement and you're going to kind of go forward. And I think that leads to a lot of swing and miss, which is what we saw in his profile early in his big league career.
I think there's a simple follow-up question just as far as like changing your feet. How much work do you have to put in to get your feet closer together and to be comfortable with that too? Because the obvious thing when you see it side by side for a person like me who didn't play is like, just pull your feet closer together, dude. Just make your feet like Judge's feet and then it should work a little better for you.
Yeah, I think I think it's not necessarily about the stance per se. I think it's more like the weight distribution, right? I always like to feel like I would practice like the Sadahara O, drill where I would be on my back leg, being able to balance on that back leg, my front foot held in the air. And I had a relatively wide stance, but my weight distribution allowed me to stay on my backside and be balanced. And so I wanted to feel like I could just be hanging out on my backside indefinitely until I decided to make the decision to swing the bat.
That's interesting. I mean, it has some corollaries to pitching where one of the big drills in pitching is called the janitor drill, where you turn your back. It's almost like the Cueto or something where you turn your back to the plate and come all the way around. So what you're doing is you're putting more weight in the back. You're giving more rubber band stretch between the front and the back, so that can help you with bat speed. But it's also something that Max Muncy told me was the big difference between him in Oakland and him in LA was being in his back leg more, staying back more. It's staying back more does not necessarily mean changing your intercept point and letting the ball travel. It means it's something about where your weight is distributed before you start. So you were also talking about like, if you are sort of drifting forward, some part of your body might have to go back to kind of make contact with the ball, whereas you kind of just want everything to be fluid into the ball.
Yeah, well, behind the ball, right? Like that's like behind it and through it. And so when you like, and I agree, like his intercept point versus the center of mass, like especially with this tilt, right? With a below average tilt at 29 degrees, I want to see that contact point a little further out front, which it is at 33, right? Versus 30.8. So I think
don't want it with this weight distribution the way it is.
With the weight distribution moving forward, right? So so when you're moving forward into the ball, it's what I would call that is it's momentum as opposed to torque, right? So I think that he is creating more momentum into the ball than he's creating torque. And I think torque is more efficient.
Yeah, Donnie Ecker had a drill that was really interesting where he told players he would put the machine up really high velo, and he told players, wait as long as you can and then pull the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that was about weight distribution and still going and getting the ball. So, staying back, but also going and get the ball out front. So I don't know, that's something that occurred to me. But, when I look at these guys, I do think they have, somebody asked me on a podcast recently, what are two things that you care about most in like a young player? And especially if it's the smallest in a small sample or like, a few looks, what would I care about the most? The things I care about the most are making contact and swing the bat hard. I just think if you can do both of those things, then you can be great. If you can do one of those things, then you can be in the big leagues, right? So and so what we have here is, we have a guy who in Keaschall, okay, I'll start with Caglianone. He has great bat speed and actually not too bad of a whiff. So I looked at all swings above 75 miles an hour. He had 34% of his swings were above 75 miles an hour. And I took everybody that was had a quarter of their swings and more, and then I sorted them by whiffs. And amazingly, Jake Bauers, when he swings really hard, he only whiffs 19% of the time. Drake Baldwin, 25% of his swings are over 75 miles an hour. He only whiffs 19% of the time on those pitches. So then you get some really good players. Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Junior Caminero. Joe Adell does not whiff as much as you think. Addison Barger, Jack Caglianone. If you think about tilt, the comps here for Jack Caglianone are Addison Barger, Junior Caminero, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. in terms of swinging hard and making contact. On the other side, you have John Kensky Noel, Luis Robert Jr., Kyle Schwarber, and Dalton Varsho. But I would say those guys all swing and miss 3-4 percentage points more. So I don't know if they're great comps, but it is the risk for Jack is if he doesn't make contact, he could be one of those guys. But all those guys have power. So I think Jack Caglianone is going to get into his power this year. I think he'll make some small adjustments. Maybe it is with the center of the mass. I think he could also just choose different pitches. He has a great natural ability to make contact, so he chases a lot. And so I'm not saying that we're going to make a guy who doesn't chase at all out of him. But if he can just zero in on where he does the most damage and try to focus on that as opposed to protecting the plate or having some sort of sense of like swing at strikes. I wouldn't say that to him. I'd be like, swing at the things that you can kill, like find your spot. And that's really hone in on that. Alex Bregman, I only swing at things that I think I can homer on. Like I would want to have a little bit of that from Jack. Yeah. But Keaschall, on the other hand, has 66.9% bat speed. That's really low. 67 miles per hour and lower. They have 120 player seasons of this already, right? And of the 120 player seasons, only 8 were above average players. And from that sample, it's Perdomo, Nathan Lucas, Early Clement, Nolan Shanuel, Stephen Kwan, Luis Arias. Those are the types of players that Keaschall's in. They didn't all make above average seasons. It's Bryce Turang in 2024 when he was below average. It's not Bryce Turang in 2025 when he added a little bit of bat speed, So, he's right there where that looks like a bad outcome. You're talking about an 8 to 10% hit rate on this. You're like, ooh, I don't know about this group of players. On the other hand, he had a 6.8% swing strike rate. You have 146 player seasons of that in the last 3 years, and 71 of them were above average, right? So that's a 50-50 proposition that the contact he makes is good enough to make him a major leaguer and an above average major leaguer. So I think both these guys are major leaguers. Mm-hmm. Both of them have some reduced floor because of their current flaws. I would give like your whole setup, Derek. I would that's where I would go. I would say that Jack has the better upside because he has the better bat speed. If he puts that whiff rate together with that bat speed, maybe better mechanics and better choices, he could be a star. Mm-hmm. I don't know that Keaschall's a star because the only person on this whole list that was a star is Perdomo, and that was a little bit of a surprise. And there's some defensive value as a portion of that, where Keaschall probably won't give you that at second base. So I think Keaschall, I think they're both major leaguers. I think they're both fairly safe draft picks this year. But if you're drafting for upside, I think Caglianone's the one.
Yeah. And I look at Caglianone too. I get some, some thoughts on Keaschall too, but just to go back on like batted ball profile and like where what the setup leads to, like he's at a 50.6% ground ball percentage versus a 44% league average and 4% higher on the pull ground ball. And I think that also is reflective of his setup, right? Because I think when you are that far out front, like you're almost forced to roll the ball over, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're kind of your momentum. You've already committed your swing, and you end up rolling the ball over a lot more. And so if I'm him, if I'm his coaches, I'm looking at his stance setup. I'm saying, let's get you a little bit further, back in your stance, a little bit more 60-40 in that back leg. Let's stay behind the ball a little bit more. So we can stay through it a little bit more, keep that contact point where it is, but let's just start. And then let's really focus on keeping that head still, because I think when you're in that 50-50 proposition, the head has a tendency to leak forward, because if you're not on that backside to start with, you're going to land heavy on your front foot, and that's going to lead to a lot of head movement. And when that head moves forward, you're going to end up having a lot of tilt back too, which leads to either ground balls to the full side or pop-ups to the other side. And then with Keaschall, I think here's a guy I look at, with a high tilt, right? Low bat speed, high tilt. It kind of reminds me of like a Jacob Wilson in a way. But I think his intercept point is actually too far out front. Here's a guy with the high tilt and a 33.1 inch intercept point versus a 30.8 average. Another guy who is more of that 50-50. His feet are deep in the box as well, but a 23.3 depth. So he's similarly very 50-50, but he has a high tilt swing with a out front contact point. And I just think when you're that high tilt player, you have to let the ball travel a little bit more.
The best players in the league have high bat speed and let the ball travel and high tilt. Those are, that's Ohtani, Kurtz, Judge. Yep. I don't know exactly what you do when you have low bat speed and high tilt, but if you are a guy who makes a lot of contact, I think you do want to spray it around. If you do what he does, we even saw with Luis Arias, the defense starts to really zone in on you. Luis Arias has a guy standing, like the left fielder stands like 10 feet behind the third baseman at this point, because they can see when he stands at the plate, he's like, does this with his hands. And you're like, oh, you're just trying to hit it to left field right there.
Yeah. So I mean, Wilson
depend in a certain way.
Just as an example, Jacob Wilson, 63.9 bat speed. So even lower, same tilt, virtually the same tilt, 35-degree tilt versus Keaschall's 36-degree tilt. Difference is Jacob Wilson has a 30.6 intercept
point. He lets
point.
it travel 3 inches more.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's pretty interesting to me when you look at where Keaschall hit the handful of homers that he hit in the big leagues this year. I mean, there's 3, I think, in the left center field gap and 1 in the right center field gap. Just like, doesn't pull him, doesn't go down the line the opposite way, just hits him out to the.
Yeah, he's very up the middle. His spray chart is very up the middle.
Very up the middle with that power. Yeah.
And for just as another point, Jacob Wilson's depth in the box is 28.5, right? So his center of mass is 5 inches further back than Keaschall's.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I think we're more likely to be enamored by the Caglianone profile than the Keaschall profile, because they might not be even like equal in terms of the likelihood of them hitting various levels of potential, but I think we can dream on what Caglianone can do easier. With Keaschall, you're like, oh, we've got to improve this. We got to tweak this. Maybe the defense has to get better. He's got to steal a lot of bases. He's got to do all these extra things to exceed expectations, where with Caglianone, it's like, well, if he could just make the adjustments and tap into that power, that's really all we need him to do for him to get all the way to that top end outcome.
Yeah. I mean, I think, I don't know if Keaschall has the same bat to ball skills that Jacob Wilson does, but Jacob Wilson's a 3-WAR player this year, right? With slower bat speed. So
also shortstop though.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know how, I guess I'm curious now. I didn't look at Wilson in terms of his defensive outs above average. Like I don't know if I don't know if Jacob is going to be considered, his arm strength. So I'm looking now, his arm strength is 88.9. So it's higher, but he's a -2, outs above average. So
yeah. Okay. So the defense didn't help him that much. You're right. Okay.
Yeah. The defense didn't help him. I mean, the guy hit 311 with a 355 on base and a 444 slug with, one of the slowest bats in the game, but high contact, appropriate stance and intercept point for the tilt in his swing.
But generally, I think two players we just like for different reasons, because the expectations are from this starting point likely going to vary quite a bit. So thank you for that question, Gilded Age.
Yeah, great question.
Going in the drafts.
Good question there. Let's see.
Because I think that Keaschall's going to have some helium. Second base sucks.
Second base is a problem for sure. Keaschall's going around pick 150 overall right now.
Yeah.
Next to Dylan Cruz, Cedon Rafaela, Lawrence Butler goes in that range just for a few kidder comps there. Jack Caglianone is going around pick 200 right now. That puts him in like the Kerry Carpenter, Alec Burleson, Marshall bucket, like the low average.
At price, I'm thinking
profiles.
Jack, I think.
Yeah. I think
certainly on the upside, right?
Yeah. I mean, Cedon plays second base and has done a lot, There's a little bit more. I think you're assured of him playing somewhere on the diamond, stealing a certain amount of bags. Like I'd rather have Cedon at the same price as
so
Keaschall,
much defensive value that he's going to find time even on a crowded depth chart because he's good enough to play. Like I
don't love his bat either, but it just seems like more of a sure thing.
But I think Keaschall's going to get plenty of chances in Minnesota because they are in spending limit city right now. They're not going to bring in pricey veteran competition for anything in Minnesota. They're a mess that probably deserves a deep dive at some point in the near future.
The newest rumors are that Joe Ryan's going to go, and if Joe Ryan goes, that Byron Buxton will, waive his no trade and go too.
So they have to trade Ryan to get Buxton to waive the no trade clause. Like they have to make it so bleak that he's like, all right, fine. I wanted to stay.
Fine, I'll go.
Jeez, we'll waive the no trade. Trade me. That's dark, man. I don't like those vibes at all coming out of Minnesota. Sell the team. Like you don't want to run a team. Just sell it. Cash out. Like what are you waiting for? All right, let's dig into a couple other topics here before we go. A little bit of a long episode today. Eno has a vote, and I don't think we've had a chance to talk to Jed in the past about Hall of Fame voting and what matters to him and what doesn't necessarily matter. I think we've reached that point in the calendar. I think the same sort of thing happens every year, guys, in the sense that it comes back to this annual wrestling match with what is known as the character clause. It's Rule 5, right? The BBWAA gives you a set of rules, things you should be considering when voting. For those who don't know, Rule 5 reads as follows: voting shall be based upon the player's record, playing ability, integrity, sportsmanship, character, and contributions to the team or teams on which the player played. Now, the word character carries a lot of different meaning for different people, right? Like, did you have off-field legitimate legal problems? Did you do things that were harmful to other people? Or were you mean to the media? Like, character covers all of that stuff depending on who is interpreting what character is supposed to mean. I think I know where you stand on this. I think you just don't like that aspect of the clause. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it's not because you don't care about character. It's because it's really hard to be this person who decides what's right and what's wrong, because these are not, we're comparing apples and oranges in many of these instances.
Well, I'm still a fairly recent voter, but we're going through players that are mostly players that I was a fan of, rather than covering them in the clubhouse. Now, I've talked to Rick Porcello a few times, and there's some guys, some of the new guys, we're starting to get, like I interviewed Alex Gordon a bunch of times. So we're starting to get to guys I actually interviewed. Maybe if I actually interviewed them, I'd have a better sense of their character. But I think that there's inherently a flaw with, like, it's like I just had a piece about makeup that just went up yesterday, and one of the flaws.
Great piece, by the way. Great piece, by the way.
One of the flaws of scouting makeup is that it's an interaction between my personality and the other person's personality. There's going to be some sort of interaction, and if I, it's a little bit easier with Barry, who has multiple different types of marks against him. Barry Bonds has different types of marks against him, but I do think it's a little bit harder for say like an Andrew Jones, who like he has a mark against him a long time ago, one incident. How do I weigh that? I wasn't there. I didn't see what happened. Like I wasn't reporting on it. I didn't see the police report. Like, and I feel a little bit like I'm going to keep him out because of this one incident that I don't know. I mean, I would vote for him otherwise. I vote for him based on player, on what he played on the field. So I tend to lean towards play on the field. That's where I tend to lean. And then the other thing that's hard, of course, is the blown tests. Emmanuel Ramirez and Alex Rodriguez, and Andy Pettitte. I've drawn this line. I don't know if it's fair, but Bud Selig is in the Hall of Fame, and so the line that I've drawn is if there was something, if you were on the Mitchell report, or if there was something like Andy Pettitte never failed a test, there was he was on the Mitchell report, then you were part of Bud Selig's legacy. You were part of the time when there was no testing policy, so you were, if Bud Selig is in, we've decided that was fine. The 90s were fine. We're rewarding Bud Selig. So if you didn't fail a test, and you played well enough to go in the Hall of Fame, I will vote for you. I voted for Gary Sheffield. I will vote for Andy Pettitte. I will not vote for Manuel Ramirez and Alex Rodriguez. And I don't know. Alex Rodriguez didn't really technically fail a test either, but it was into the new era.
And he was suspended. And I think, to me, that's the line. Because it has to be retroactive too. Because the things that they test for now are very different than, even pre-steroids, right?
Yeah, they test for things that cover things up. And greenies.
Well, and greenies and amphetamines, and you look at previous generations, and speculation on use of those types of performance enhancers. So I think to me the line, you said what your line is. My line is if you were suspended, not if you failed a test. If you were suspended. And so if you were suspended for performance enhancing drugs, my line is that, right? Because everything else it's either speculation, or you are, you're just assuming something that either the league couldn't prove via a test or paper trail. But there have been players that have been suspended that haven't failed tests.
That's true. I mean, it's also it is an important one, because if I want to say I just want to vote by the numbers, and then you've been suspended for performance enhancing drugs, like how much can I trust your numbers? It's a classic question. So it's maybe I'm wriggling through a loophole. It makes people mad. I think people would rather I didn't vote for Gary Sheffield and Andy Pettitte either. Or I voted for all of them. There's a lot of people who are out there just say vote them all in. And I sort of understand it all, and I'm just trying to figure it out myself. It's my least favorite part of the voting. I wish I could just look at the numbers. Even then, I think there's a lot of debate that we could have just on the numbers. It's, for example, the ballot for the veterans has Don Mattingly, Dale Murphy, and Jeff Kent on it. And Jeff Kent has the best numbers of the three. And I think the best case, but I think that Dale Murphy and Don Mattingly will get in, I don't know, because maybe some of the relationships with the people on the group, or media, like Kent was surly as well, I don't really know. Maybe it's that he played in San Diego and didn't play in New York City. There's things that go on there, but one thing that does occur to me about this regular ballot is I'm normally a 10 guy. Like I'm a sort of more of a big haul guy, and I usually find 10 guys to vote for. But I may not vote for 10 this year. Before, I haven't like figured it all out yet, but I'm probably voting for Robbie Abreu, Carlos Beltran. I'm up in the air on Mark Burley. I'm voting for Felix Hernandez. I'm voting for Andrew Jones. I'm voting for Andy Pettit. And I'm voting for Chase Utley. So those are my definite votes, or close to definite votes. And then I'll be looking at, David Wright is just such a short career. Jimmy Rollins, the defensive numbers are tanking his WAR and stuff. I know that, like, I think when I was a kid watching Jimmy Rollins, I thought he was a Hall of Famer. So, there's some guys that I want to look a little bit harder at. But like David Wright and Dustin Pedroia are a classic, like, just, they were great, but they didn't play that long.
Yeah. And I something that really stuck out to me, what you just said too, you're talking about Jeff Kent being surly with the media, is like, what is the responsibility of the player? Is like the responsibility like more towards your teammates and your team, or, to the media? Like, I guess your point of like the gray area of like character is like, I understand that like having access to the media, it's good for the game, but like the how you interact with the media versus how you interact with your teammates. I guess that's, I guess that's probably more of a, that's more of a debate for me, is like, what is the responsibility of the player? Because I would make the argument that the responsibility is more towards your teammates and competing on the field and like pulling for your teammates in the field. So if we're trying to parse those two things.
Yeah, that's another thing. Like there are definitely, Barry has never been kind to me. I've never really enjoyed interacting with him. Mm-hmm. But if there weren't these other aspects of his candidacy, I would have voted for him second. I think he's the best player I've ever seen play.
Yep.
So, I try to separate that. Yeah. Just because a person's been a to me or whatever, like I don't think, like, for me, Kent is a Hall of Famer actually, and I think he has one of the best arguments on this veterans ballot. What's the veterans ballot fully? It's
that group is Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens. So
yes, besides those guys, in terms of play on the field, they deserve to be in. But
right, Fernando Valenzuela is on there this year. Let's see.
Then it's the Murphy.
Dale Murphy's on there. Yeah.
He's close. He had 2 MVPs. He was really good when he was good. He was kind of like a top 10 player for 5, 6, 7 years. His 7-year output in terms of a peak output is better than Kent's, is better than Mattingly's. I actually think that Murphy would be a Hall of Famer for me too.
Carlos Delgado, Don Mattingly, and Gary Sheffield.
Gary Sheffield.
Yeah.
Valenzuela doesn't have really the numbers, I guess. He did get to 2,900 innings, but he had 173 wins, 40 wins above replacement, a career 3.54 WAR. He had a lot of years at the end where he was hurt and he had bad ERAs, and he was really good for a while. It would be kind of like putting him in would be not so much about his numbers, and it would be more about Fernando Mania and like that period of time, and like wanting to have that period of time represented in the Hall of Fame, and like that the way he burst onto the scene and what he did. It's not so much about his numbers.
And his importance to the franchise and the game as a whole too, right? I think he's a huge part of the story for the Dodgers as a franchise, but baseball players, Mexicans, like coming to play in the big leagues, like Fernando Valenzuela is huge in that history. So that's where I feel like the nuance, and I like that there are other ways in eventually, because as time passes, as people learn more about different aspects of players' lives, there's at least an opportunity for a committee. This one gets together. The Contemporary Baseball Era Committee meets Sunday this weekend. You need 75% of the vote from that committee. It's made up of former players. There's, I think, a couple owners on there. Jason Stark's part of it this year. So it's like just a really just a different group of people that looks at this the last time, and they have pretty spirited debates about everything too, which is really interesting. Carlos Delgado is one of those guys. If you get asked a question about power numbers from the mid 90s to like the mid 2000s, Carlos Delgado is usually on those lists. He's like often a correct trivia answer if you're looking for some thumpers from that era.
Also, not someone that was great to the media, but he had his reasons. He was treated poorly by the media in certain cases, and he's also just, in terms of WAR, would come up a little bit short. The benchmark is usually around 50, 60 WAR, and he's at 44. So I don't know. That's
I guess, you're talking about Dale Murphy, who obviously fantastic player, but 46.5 WAR. I'm going to, Gary Sheffield, 60 WAR. I've gotten to know Gary a little bit over the last, year and a half. And the guy, there's probably wasn't a more fierce competitor, and it probably boiled over sometimes with the media, but I can't imagine, looking at this guy's performance on the field and what he meant to his teammates, and say that this guy, isn't Hall of Famer. And then if we're comparing, you said Pedroia and Wright, just didn't play long enough. Pedroia is a 51-2 WAR guy. David Wright's a 49-1 WAR guy.
Right, yeah. And
Dale Murphy played for 18 years and only had 46.5 WAR. And I'm not saying that Dale Murphy's not a Hall of Famer. I'm just saying, isn't it more impressive that those two accumulated more WAR in fewer years?
I guess, but you could play the string out and be terrible and not add. You know what I mean? It's sort of.
But even if you don't add, right? You're still.
You're probably not subtracting. But what I think is going to happen for players, I think David Wright's a great example of this. I think because of the physical wear and tear we're seeing on modern players and how we're breaking players at an alarming rate, I think those thresholds are going to continue to change in people's minds.
Agreed.
So, David Wright probably won't get elected by the writers, but we may get to a point 15 or 20 years from now where a committee looks at David Wright through the lens of having watched baseball for 15 or 20 more years with shorter careers and better peaks. And David Wright might look really good through those lenses down the road, right? That's sort of why I like that committee sort of approach. Is just you get a better feel for how the game evolves. You can kind of look at an era a little easier. I think the further you get away from it, because a new era comes in and just kind of shapes your brain a little bit differently.
Yeah, I think the ideal candidate, the first ballot types, they had a great peak and they also played for a while,
Sure.
And then I think really some of the harder stuff is Andrew Jones had a great peak. He did not play well at the end. And that colors how people think of him. And he's a little bit more defense forward in terms of his candidacy as well. So, but I do struggle with the peak versus longevity. I want there to be longevity. I did grow up in an era where it's 500 homers and 300 wins, but I also know we may not ever get another starter with 300 wins. Justin Verlander is not going to get to 300 wins. That's amazing to me. How Justin Verlander is 43 and still pitching and still pretty good, and he's not going to get to 300 wins. Maybe nobody's going to get to 300 wins.
Yeah, and that's we hold the Hall of Fame as comparing against historical standards, but the game changes, and I'm a big believer that the Hall of Famers are the best players of the generation, right?
You should
when
be
you're comparing
their peers.
Correct, to their generation.
That's why I vote for Felix Hernandez. Honestly.
Well, you look at David Wright and you look at Dustin Pedroia, and they played for 14 years, right? That's going to be, I think, when we look back at this in 10 years, I think that's going to be considered a long time in this generation.
Yeah, because also free agency and market forces are cutting careers short.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think there's a much different attitude towards keeping guys around for age 35, 36, 37 seasons if they project as 1.5 WAR players. Why why do that when I could replace that player for the league minimum, right? That's the direction
precisely.
front offices have gone over time too, and I think it's
smart business too. It's smart business.
Do we get time for one more topic? I know this episode's really long, but we can maybe squeeze in one more because
it just won't make sense to talk about it during the winter meetings and later. So let's say everyone read Jason Stark's double and triples thing. He pointed out that the level of double and triples is at the lowest ever. I think it's a really good story. He suggests that maybe they draw a line in the grass in the outfield, and I'm totally okay with that because I've been to different stadiums where they've had different things mowed in the outfield, and I've never once noticed them. I think you could look exactly like the infield, just another little circle out there. I don't think it has to look all crazy. You don't have to draw, circles around, where they have to be. You don't have to draw circles in the outfield. Just mow a line out there and gain some doubles and triples back. I like it because I want hitters that hit the ball hard up the middle in places that used to be hits. In the gaps. I want those to be hits.
You're telling me.
Yeah. I feel like this is a Trevor day. Trevor's like, there's nothing wrong. Let the outfielders play the way they're playing. Yeah. Play the outfielders as deep as they can play because we'll take those extra base hits away, and that's good for pitching. It's good for run prevention.
I think I still have nightmares about the Houston Astros outfield defensive alignment.
Oh my gosh!
I mean,
they use the boxes. They use the boxes to do a weird outfield alignment, right?
Oh my God. I like, because the way biomechanically, the way I moved and then the way that they attacked me was if I took my A swing with the pitches that they were trying to execute, I was either going to pull the ball on the ground or hit in the air, the opposite field basically. And so they shifted their infield to the pull side and the outfield to the opposite side. And I mean, and I think that works. They can determine where you're going to hit that ball based on your biomechanics at this point. Everything we just talked about between stance and intercept point, like there's a other side to that coin.
Right. There's a quote in the story about how they don't look so much at your spray chart as they look at, just your hit chart or something. They look at your exit velocity chart. They look at where your hardest hits go, and they put the guy right there so that you hit that ball 105 screamer to the outfield, and the guy's like, pop. Just standing there
right there.
In the cards, maybe you could ban the cards. They're looking down at a card that tells them take 3 steps this way, 4 steps that way. There's
the only thing I have, is how do you, with 4 umpires, how do you enforce it? Right. The umpire, especially the second base umpire, is standing behind the infielders and can visually see if they're on one side of second base or not.
Turn around and look at all the outfielders too.
While the pitch is being released.
Yeah.
I mean, that's I agree.
That didn't come up in the piece, I don't think. That's an interesting thought.
Jason should have called me. So
you might have to have another umpire. The umpires are okay with that.
So I guess just from the logistical perspective, how do you enforce it? I am fully on board with this.
Yeah.
I just don't know how you enforce it.
I do think one of the aesthetic things about having new boundaries, new lines on the field is I think we were all in agreement talking about this before the show that we would rather have it be like a mowed line. So it sort of looks natural as far as like there's a limitation on where outfielders can play depth wise instead of having paint or the circles that Ito was talking about. Like just make it look nice. If we're going to put some restrictions in place, don't make the field look ridiculous.
Even if it has to be a line, the 3-point line didn't exist, and that was a huge innovation in basketball. And I know that there's some people saying, "Oh, basketball sucks now." I really enjoy basketball now, and I think without the 3-point line, we would just have a lot of 7-footers, clogging up the lane. Like you wouldn't have the stretched out game that you have now. So I think sometimes it's worth drawing a line and seeing what will happen.
What do 7-footers who don't play professional basketball end up doing? I never see them
hitting their heads on doors.
We always
Did you ever see
volleyball? Volleyball was like at Stanford, the D1 volleyball players would pick up basketball in my pickup basketball game sometimes, and I got destroyed. Those guys can jump too. Yeah. They were good basketball players, man. They'd always put me up against, because I'm 6'2". They'd be like, "Okay, you get the 6'6", D1 volleyball player," and I'm like, "No, why?"
I went to high school with a guy that ended up going to Stanford on a volleyball scholarship, and you didn't want to be on the other side of the net. In gym class. That wasn't good. Wasn't a good place to be. We are going to go on our way out the door. A reminder, you can join our Discord. We've got a show survey that'll be up. So if you made it all the way to the end of the show, you probably love Rates and Barrels. We'll drop that link to the survey in the show description. We really appreciate anybody who takes the time to answer a few questions. We're going to learn a little bit more about things you like, things you don't like, and get some feedback on how we can make the show even better in 2026. So that's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you Monday from the winter meetings.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.